Live from the Clarity from Chaos studios, heard worldwide, it's Dave Campbell. On every episode, Dave and his guests explore, discuss, and work on solutions to some of life's biggest challenges. So, if you're ready, be prepared to be enlightened, amused, and even shocked by what you hear. And now, the real, the authentic, the one and only Dave Campbell.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to Clarity from Chaos. I'm your host, Dave Campbell. On this episode, we're going to dive into the world of education. To lead the discussion, we're pleased to welcome the best-selling author of Parents' Guide to Homeschool, Making Education Easy and Fun, Ms. Sam Sorbo. Sam hosts her own radio show, The Sam Sorbo Show, daily, and it is sought after as a public speaker. Welcome to the show, Sam.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here.
So, relative to homeschooling, I wanted to start out with your thoughts on the closing of the Department of Education, and your thoughts on the impact that it's going to have on homeschooling.
Oh, interesting. Typically, people ask the impacts on school, but the Department of Education should close. There should be no federal Department of Education. According to our Constitution, that is an issue that is relegated to the states.
Right.
And so there never should have been a Department of Education, and there shouldn't be one, and so they should close it. How they close it is really the details, right? That's the fine print. It looks like right now they are just going to apportion all the funds into different areas. And so really the only savings that we will have is of the sort of 4,000 bureaucrats or so who do things at the department. Yeah. But of course, the Department of Education of the United States has nothing to do with learning.
No.
Or education.
No, and that was the reason for my question, is because all we're really talking about is riffing a bunch of people. We're not really talking about fundamentally doing anything other than it shouldn't have been done in the first place, right?
Yeah, but unfortunately there's a lot of money that sort of filters through it.
Right.
And that will be apportioned to other agencies. And so most of that won't change.
Right.
Which means that the federal government will still be involved in the school system.
Right. Okay.
Now, leaving that aside for just a minute, because your question was, what effect will it have on homeschooling?
Yep.
So we are at a little bit of a crossroads right now, in that school will never beat homeschooling. The statistics show that homeschooled or home educated youth score typically about 25% better on standardized tests. So that's their metric, not ours. And I say ours as in the homeschool, cadre, and then the bureaucratic cadre, right?
Right.
So by their own measures, they are failing, but no one's holding them accountable, except the homeschoolers are showing them for what they are. Therefore, they must shut down homeschooling. And that is their position. And I want to point out also that not only do generalized homeschoolers score 25% better, but inner city children score up to 42% better.
Wow.
On their standardized tests, better than their peers.
Right.
And so when you have those metrics, you've got a problem in justifying keeping schools around.
Well, yeah, I mean, you're sitting here looking at the cost per child for education relative to the test scores, and it's completely out of whack. I mean, completely out of whack.
I mean, just from that standpoint alone, why are we paying all this money?
Exactly.
What if we paid nothing and then tested the kids?
Yeah. Well, the interesting thing is there's the whole thing on vouchers. But I'm wondering if they really should take it a step further, and for those parents that want to stick their toe in the water, give some kind of credit to the homeschoolers.
Well, they do. So depending on the state, right? We have, I think, 13 states now, maybe 14, that have enacted some sort of ESA or voucher program. My position is that those programs are intended to shut down home education and corporatize or make federal institutions out of or government institutions out of the private sector schools.
Yeah.
Because they always say the selling point is always The money follows the child, no strings attached.
Yeah.
That's
Okay.
USAID. We've tried that. It's not pleasant. We
Right.
sent money to Ukraine, billions of dollars, no strings attached. And now we're upset
Right.
because we said it, no strings attached, right? And so when they say no strings attached, people only see ups. This is the problem, is we all went to school, so we weren't educated. We were schooled. For instance, we have no discernment. So when we hear no strings attached, nobody says, wait a minute, but those are my tax dollars. I kind of want some strings on them. I don't want them just going to people willy-nilly.
Right.
You
Well,
need to prove something.
Well, that's
For
kind of
instance,
the
you
big
need to prove
argument
that
with
you have a child.
yeah,
That's
kind
a
of
string.
yeah, that's kind of the big argument right now with Doge, right?
Yes.
Everybody, how could Elon come across and find all of this stuff? Oh my goodness, and so on and so on and so on. And it's kind of like, well, duh, don't you want some accountability for the money that you keep throwing over the fence? So it to me, it's just a bizarre reaction to the whole concept of rooting out the corruption and the fraud and everything else.
Well, so
Go ahead.
let's be careful. It's not bizarre. They all have skin in this game.
They,
So
when you say they, who do you when you
in the government.
okay?
So the government was supposed to, in the Congress, they were supposed to vote on cutting all the spending that, not all of it, but cutting the main things that Doge discovered were like misspent funds.
Right.
And they decided not to vote because they all have an investment and they don't want to go on record voting down someone else's pet project when their pet project will be on the chopping block next week.
Well, see, and then I think if you peel the onion back just a little bit more,
you can, but I'll cry.
You find out that how congressmen and senators go into politics for a fixed salary, and then 3 or 4 years later, they're millionaires.
Yeah.
And you're sitting there scratching your head going, well, I know people that live next door to me that make a relatively good living. And in 3 or 4 years, they're not millionaires. So something's amiss. But when they threatened to start looking at that problem, it was announced and went away almost immediately. Because to your point, somebody was getting interested in snatching the milk stool, and they couldn't have that, right? They can't have the milk stool snatched out from underneath them.
Well, they were about to snatch the cow.
Yeah, well, that's true.
So if you want, because all roads lead to education.
Right.
Why are we in this predicament? Because we have been schooling ourselves. We've been going to school for K through 12, 13 years of indoctrination, that money is the highest value. And there is no integrity. There is no morality. Everything else is just a crapshoot, but money.
Right.
And there's the answer to all of your pain. There's the answer to life's riddles. There's the answer to success. It's all about the money, so that we have a love of money. That's why when the government says, hey, conservatives, we have an idea. Let's try this socialist idea where we will redistribute taxpayer money to parents with children. The conservatives are like, oh, that sounds fantastic because I like money. And the conservatives are arguing with me and saying, Sam, this program is hugely successful. Okay, define success.
Right.
The parents love it. Oh, the parents love getting a check from the government? Well,
really?
color me surprised.
Yeah.
But that's not a success metric, because your stated goal is test score improvement. And what we will see is a decline in test scores as this proceeds, because we have the example. We have several examples. The most notable one is in Sweden, where they put in universal school choice, socialist society, the government funded it all. And 10 years later, there's no more homeschool and there are no more private schools. They're all government run.
Well, there you go.
And so that's why I start this conversation with the comparison, because the government schools will never even come close to homeschooling.
No.
But they have to do something about this disparity of outcomes. And that's their answer, is basically to buy them all up. They're going to buy up all the private schools and all the homeschoolers. So here in the state of Florida, we have the PrEP Act or whatever. We have the, it's an ESA. It's an education savings account. and you can get like $8,500 per child. And it is per child. It's a lot of money, actually, because it doesn't cost nearly that much to homeschool. But if you're a homeschooler and you take the money, you are no longer classified as a homeschooler.
Aha.
So there you go.
There you go.
So they're
they've
just
got you on-
eliminating all the homeschoolers. And
Yeah.
then what's going to happen? So people are wondering, well, Sam, how can you say that all the private schools will be government run? Because the money will come with strings. There have to be regulations. You don't want there to not be regulations.
Right.
There should be regulation. I just don't want the government regulating it, but there will be regulations, and the money's coming from the government. Therefore, the government has claim to regulate it. The moment that money enters your private school is beholden
Yeah.
to
You're
the
done.
check writer.
Yeah. You're done. You're done.
And they're
to
saying,
the-
but it's the parents that are writing the checks. No, it's not, because in fact, there's a pretty famous video now, Candace Cameron Bure. And I think I'm trying to be generous. I think she didn't quite realize what she was getting into when she agreed to promote this. It's a company that will help you spend your education dollars, basically. And they offer like curricula and stuff like that. And so the ad that it's just a video that she did. And she says, and so all you have to do is you apply. And when the government approves your application, then you can go and get all of this great curriculum when the government approves your application. And
Yeah.
I don't even know if she heard herself say it, but she should have. And then she should have casually backed away from the
Yeah.
microphone,
yeah.
because we should not be encouraging people to sign up to be entrapped by their government.
No. It's interesting. I was encouraged. The only thing that encouraged me during COVID was the fact that homeschooling kind of got a kick in the pants and got a boost to a certain extent. And at my church last weekend, we did the graduation ceremonies, and out of all of the kids, about half of them were homeschooled and were going on to major universities.
That's too bad.
But that because all of that wasted time in the homeschooling
We'll
is
see how that
gonna
works
go
out
right
in
down
the
the
end.
crapper. I get that.
So funny. I was on the phone with a friend who partly homeschooled and partly schooled his daughter, and she decided that she really didn't need college. But a lot of her friends went off to college, and now she's dealing with the fallout because all
Yeah.
of her friends are riding the woke train. And they're dyeing their hair and they're sleeping around and they're doing like whatever
Right.
this behavior, this acting out. And they all grew up, relatively conservative Christian. They went to a Christian school. They did all the right things, all the, so-called right things.
Right.
But you can't, it's very, very difficult to impart solid values in a child when you're not around.
Yeah.
And we trust the school so implicitly because we went to school and they taught us to trust them. And
Yeah.
so
The unfortunate part is I think, homeschooling can impart a lot of that up until the point where they actually, step across the threshold and go out into the ugly world that's out there. But hopefully you've given them enough ammunition to combat a certain amount of that. And I think the church should be involved in that as well.
Well, okay. So if you don't mind, I'd love to take that apart just a little bit.
Sure.
When we say homeschooling, I speak about home education.
Okay.
And so there's a difference. And there are a lot of people out there that are homeschooling, but whatever K through 12 curriculum is online.
Right.
They, have a checklist that they give the kids, and then that's basically it. And they go to church once a week. That's not what is meant by home education,
Okay.
where the child is encouraged to learn the things that interest the child among the things that are academic that the parent feels is important. But also it involves reading the Bible every day, because that's the only way to really impart virtue into a child and to teach them to search for truth. And when you teach a child to search for truth and you give him the tools to learn, then you will have a truth-seeking lifelong learner, which is somebody who will not succumb to the woke ideology, will not succumb to the fickle ways of the culture, because they've been based in this steadfast truth, which is different than just trying to accomplish data entry with academics, which is
Right.
what school does and what homeschoolers typically do, which is why they burn out and they throw their hands up eventually and they stick their kids back in school often. because they're so focused on somehow recreating the school, and school is not education. In fact, I tweeted this yesterday. School is a cult and it has a lot of adherents, but I finally, I literally just came up with that. Oh, it might have actually been this morning. It's a cult. There's no proof that it works, but everybody buys in and just goes whole hog. And they get offended if you attack them, if you attack their school, if you become antagonistic to their values, to their schools, to their whatever. I mean, I had parents say to me, I gave a whole 15-minute little, speech basically about how bad school is for children. And it's very bad. It's abusive to children to put them in a school environment. Full stop. It's abusive. And they agreed with everything I said, which I thought was amazing. And I said, so you homeschool your 15-year-old? Oh, no. He goes to a really, really good private school, public school, a really good public school, they said, which blew my mind. And I said, that's interesting. Define good. And they said, well, it's where we met. Literally, they have no discernment. Their definition of a good school is one where they met each other. Right. I'm like, do you think because his locker is next to where your locker was, that somehow he's going to get a solid education? Literally, what are you smoking? These people. And so we've come to this is what I say, we're at a crossroads. We have a population that refuses to think.
Well, thinking isn't taught in school anyway.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So how can we right. profess to right. educate when they refuse to teach to think? How can they claim to educate while they hide literally the greatest book of humankind in history, the greatest book in history, the best researched historical text that we have? And of course, I'm talking about the Bible.
Sure.
And they refuse to address it in the school. That's not an education.
Well, no, they went out of their way to make sure that even the semblance of religion was taken out of the school when they dumped, school prayer. I mean, so they've gone out of their way to make sure that religion is taken out of the school with some kind of concept of separation of church and state and all this other silly ass crap.
But one of the fastest growing religions is called irreligion.
Yeah.
So that's not that they don't like religion.
No, no.
They have one.
Yeah, exactly.
And they love their religion.
Absolutely.
And now their religion has morphed.
So then getting into your book where you say The Parent's Guide to Homeschool, what it really is defining homeschool as education. And what?
No, well, yes, close. It's defining education.
Yeah.
Because nobody knows what education is.
No, absolutely.
Right? So that's where we start. We start with
my challenge is most parents don't even want to go there. Yes. They want to offload that responsibility.
Yeah. It's not that it's a hugely popular book. I'm kidding.
That's not what I'm.
People actually do love it, but it's this book is for people who are willing
right.
to examine and consider what the best use of their time is with regards to their children and what their best aspirations might be for their children. And then if you follow the book, if you do the book and you sort of absorb what's in the book, it will exceed your wildest dreams, because home education is like Technicolor surround sound, Dolby 7.1, whatever, right. versus a scratchy old black and white silent picture.
Well, all education, our current educational system now is just different levels of propaganda and different levels of manipulation. It has nothing to do with education, period. Because, they're not even teaching the simplest civics classes, much less going into critical thinking or anything else.
I often say the government's in charge of schooling and doesn't teach us to pay taxes. If they had one job, it would be at least to teach us how to pay our taxes.
You would think, but not so much.
So there's a tremendous conflict of interest.
Yeah.
Right. And the government should not at all be involved in training its citizens because we are antagonistic to each other. We want limited government. Government wants exceeding great government. So it's a huge conflict. And by the way, the government's winning because they said, hey, parents, we'll take on the education of your children.
Right. Well, it's like trying to fight a virus, or push water with your nose. It just kind of keeps moving around, right?
Well, here's the thing. So I did this with my 3 kids. I have 23, 21, and 19-year-olds. And they are some of the most thoughtful, truth-seeking, engaged individuals I've ever come across. And that's not a reflection, like it is. I get it. It's a reflection on me, but it's really not of my doing, because I didn't do it on purpose, because I had no idea that I could achieve it.
Right.
I just wanted better academics. That's why I took my second grader, I took him out of school at the end of second grade, saying to Kevin, my husband, I think I could fail at homeschooling him and he'll still be better off, because there was so much other stuff in the schools that was just bad.
Well,
And I
according to
didn't
the
like the
testing, he could get
academics.
into Harvard. So, I mean,
What's that?
yes, according to the testing scores, he could still get into Harvard, for God's sake, because they've got kids graduating high school that can't even read.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
you're absolutely right.
So I started, and the one thing that I did right, which I have to profess, is we read the Bible every day.
What's wrong with
Every day.
that?
And it took me a couple years even to start doing that. We did Bible study outside the home with a group. It got
Right.
kind of boring, and then I couldn't do it anymore. And so we just started reading the Bible with each other
Right.
as a family every day. And I will tell you that just put them on they're just heavy tracking now.
Well, one of my questions that I keep hearing from people that are taking on this responsibility is there's this whole, they're not equipped socially if you handle all of this at home. And to your point, I don't know that handling it from home would probably be the best scenario than teaching the Bible, teaching the morals, teaching the ethics and everything at home, to where the outside doesn't really affect them, doesn't even play into that whole argument, because a lot of people are afraid that their kid is going to be, can't deal with groups of children, isn't socially adept and all of that other stuff. And I to be honest with you, I don't get it, because to me, there's things that I did, because I didn't homeschool my kids, but I was pretty much on top of it, that didn't become an issue. So, and the other thing, like I said a minute ago, is I just don't think parents want to take on the responsibility, Sam.
Well, that's true, which is too bad, because they clearly don't read their Bibles. But they were taught not to read in school. In school, they were taught, don't read. The teacher read the book. She's going to tell you what's in it. And so now they go to church and they go, I don't have to read my Bible. I go to church. The pastor tells me what's in it, which of course is a lie.
Right.
This whole idea of socialization, you need to define for me what is socialization, and why you think that it happens by accident in school, and how you justify children who think that they can poop in a litter box in the hallway as being socialized, right? Or furries, children wearing animal costumes to school,
right,
as being socialized.
Yeah.
And where you think that comes from. Or is that just like that's the anomaly? Every other child is captain of the football team. I mean, you really have to take a step back and define your terms. What is socialization?
Yeah.
Because nowhere in real life will your child have to deal with a room of all the same age people ever again. So what are we hoping for? The only reason we believe children get socialized in school purely by accident, because there's no class for socialization. They don't teach it. But we think that by accident, children get socialized in school because that's the only opportunity we give them,
right, well,
to make friends.
How do you?
And by the way, anybody who has ever spent time with a teenage girl who goes to school knows that that's just a mess, and they are not getting properly socialized. They're getting beat up on every single day.
Right. That was my next question is what do you tell parents? Fortunately, I didn't have to fight the cell phones and all of that crap, because I mean, I've got grandchildren that just graduated from college. Okay. So I didn't have to fight that crap. Other than the stigma that would go with me, because I wouldn't put TVs in their rooms and all of that other stuff. In today's environment, a parent's got to be very, very committed. And there's not a lot of support out there for putting your foot down and doing those things, right?
So you have to limit the electronics. And there are schools today that are enacting those policies. as a way of offering the parents an excuse. We don't allow cell phones, so you don't have to have that argument with your child. We would suggest that you don't get your child a cell phone because they won't be allowed to have it in school. And so in that way, they're enacting these types of things. Same thing with computers in the bedroom and stuff like that. And I tell parents, just postpone. It's completely not necessary. So why even entertain it? If you need to stay in touch with your child because they need to call you at some point, they're flip phones for that. You don't need to give your child a smartphone because you're not, and I'm sure you've heard this, you're not giving your child access to the internet. You're giving the internet access to your child.
Exactly.
And so when you put it in those terms, why would you do that? That's like leaving your child with a pedophile.
Yeah.
As a babysitter.
Which you literally are doing.
When you send your child to school.
Yeah.
Sadly.
Yeah.
I mean, I laugh about it, but we just had a superintendent here, I believe, arrested for pedophilia with his own grandchildren in the school.
Oh, Lord. Okay. Well.
So, I mean, at this point, and, I say this and people are aghast, but it's the truth. And I try to speak the truth sort of as boldly as I can, as bluntly as I can, so that some of it penetrates. They want to have sex with your children.
Yeah.
Prove me wrong.
Yeah, exactly.
You can find people who don't want to have sex with your children, but I can show you many more who do.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow.
So.
Well, I mean, yeah, the door's open to the entire globe, for God's sake. So, from a higher education standpoint, once the parent does the things that your book guides them through, and the child wants to go on to get higher education, are there schools? At least I think there are. Hillsdale would ring a bell with one. I think schools that the kids can go to that continue to facilitate the critical thinking and maintain the values that you've brought them up with. Obviously, you look at the major Ivy League schools now, and they're just coming apart at the seams.
Kinda.
Yeah.
It's kind of fun.
Yeah, it is kind of fun, actually. I will
say, I think Hillsdale is still stalwart. They don't take government money.
Right.
And so they can't be imposed upon by the woke mafia. There are some other schools, and there are certainly people within the institutions, right? But we've grown up now for several decades in this college prep and career readiness school culture where by hell or high water, you're going to go to college because life isn't worth living if you don't go to college. You can't be successful if you don't go to college.
Right.
One must go to college, right?
Yeah, well.
And that's no longer true. And they've done studies. It's a bit dated, but young people who were accepted into Ivy League schools, but then chose a school of lesser caliber for whatever reason, didn't want to move away from home or didn't have the money or whatever, had the same earning 5 years out after graduation as the graduates from the, hoity-toity schools. So the argument can be made, get whatever education you are desirous of as cost effectively as you can, because it's all going to come out the same in the end. And then you have to be careful because I tell this story. I spoke to a young Christian girl who was going to a small Christian college, and she had lunch with her professor. And during that lunch, she discovered that the professor was an atheist. And so she asked her, and the professor said, yes, absolutely. And the girl said, so why are you teaching here?
Yeah.
And the professor said, oh, this is my mission field. And so we think you slap the name Christian on it and somehow it's safe. No, in fact, it's a target.
Yeah.
Like it's maybe worse because you've let your guard down now. So, we have to be a lot more discerning, which again goes back to the point that we weren't taught to discern, because discernment is discrimination.
Well, it's interesting. You don't hear the word why too much anymore.
The word
why?
Why?
Yeah. When I was growing up, somebody would say something to me and the first words out of the mouth were why? Why is that happening? And, we've taken that away. We've taken away, with participation trophies, we've taken away any kind of learning from defeat. We've relegated.
And failure's bad, right? So,
absolutely.
Failure being bad in school teaches us not to try.
Right. Yeah.
So don't try. Don't think. Don't ask. What's the first thing you learn in school when you go to school? You have to sit down and shut up. And if you have a question, you have to raise your hand
Right.
you need permission to ask the question.
Right.
And so that lesson is simply don't ask. And so you're saying we don't ask why. We don't ask. Full stop. Why, what, where, when,
Yeah.
who. We
Well,
don't ask.
Yeah, we just went through a pandemic for squelching, trying to find out and asking, right? Asking why.
Nobody asked.
Yeah.
In fact, I mean, I remember when they said 2 weeks to slow the spread. My first question was, why slow the spread? Why
Yeah.
not speed the spread? Like, did anybody do that? Like, I don't know. I'm not saying we should speed the spread. I'm just saying, like, did anybody do that?
Yeah.
That exploration.
No, it was just another form of manipulation. I think, and quite frankly, I think it was a trial run for something else that.
Oh, I think that's pretty evident. Like we've
Yeah.
seen.
Yeah, they pretty
and a
much.
lot of people have seen the light, but a lot of people.
Oh no, yeah, a lot of people followed the Piper right off the end of the pier.
They're still
lot
wearing
of
masks
people.
in places.
Oh yeah, which just floors me. But anyway,
And they're still giving. They're giving the vax to.
Well, they're still
6-month-olds.
advertising the damn thing, right?
Yes.
They're still advertising it.
Yes. Come in and get your shots.
Come in and get your booster. Yeah.
I think we're on 11 now.
Yeah. Roll up your sleeve and bend over. Where can people find your radio show, Sam?
So my show it's podcast. So it's everywhere podcasts are. It's on YouTube. Do I put it on Twitter? I think I put it on Twitter. It's on Rumble. It's everywhere.
Okay.
It's just called The Sam Sorbo Show. It's downloadable and
All right.
it's a lot of fun. Talk a
Yeah.
lot about education, basically the world through the lens of education, because education informs how we approach everything, how
Right.
we ask questions, how we fail to ask questions.
Well, hell, we don't even listen to each other anymore, Sam. We
Well, I
don't.
listen to you.
Well, but if you go out into public, people are responding to you before you can get half your sentence out of your mouth. They don't even know what they're listening to. They're just
Yeah.
so hell-bent on getting their viewpoint out there that they don't even bother to listen.
Yep, there's definitely some of that.
Yeah, there's a lot of it. Social media. Where's your social media? And where can people find your book? Even though you think it may not be popular, where do you think that people can find your book?
You know what? It's funny because my first book, do I have it here? They're Your Kids, an inspirational journey from self-doubter
Mhm.
to homeschool advocate. I wrote that book and it was just a labor of love. The first part of the book is basically an indictment of the schools, how we got where we are.
Right.
And then the second half is sort of my story, how I started homeschooling, what I discovered along the way, the mistakes I made, the triumphs that I had and stuff like that. And I slowly realized, the people who should want my book, the people who want my book don't need my book. The homeschoolers,
Right.
they're already doing it. Like they don't really need my book.
Right.
The people who need my book, they don't want my book.
No,
Because-
but
Right.
it's needed. But see, economics.
Oh no, it is. And I do get really great comments back on it.
Yeah.
So it's not that people aren't enjoying it.
Well-
I wish that my book would go viral because I can set parents free from the enslavement of the school system, which is really what this is.
Well-
School is a cult. And you've bought into it because they had you for 13 years and they trained you and they trained your parents. And so it's not your fault that you're a cult follower, that you're enslaved to a cult and all that. But when they shut down the schools during COVID, you should have gotten a clue then
Yeah.
that the schools are not about education. Because, and I'll tell you a quick story. I know you're trying to wrap up, but shortly during COVID, and it was funny because during COVID, the teachers unions wanted the schools closed down, and so did I.
Well,
Like,
they
how
wanted
did
the
this
schools
happen?
closed down because they were getting all that COVID money, and they
Right.
had they.
Right. So they didn't
Oh, hell
want
no.
the schools to open.
Yeah,
but
they-
I didn't want the schools to open either,
Right.
which made strange bedfellows. In any case, my friend got a video from his school, his elementary school, a great little school in Virginia, like lots of money in that. So it was a good school. And the principal had gathered short videos from all the teachers and compiled them in a half hour, 45-minute video and sent it to all the parents to show their kids so that they could see their teachers and stay in touch. And it was just this lovely thing. And I sat through that entire video and not a single teacher. They said things like, Hi, I'm your teacher. This is Miss Mary, and I'm out walking my dog, and make sure you wash your hands. Stay safe. Not a single teacher said anything like, make sure you study your sight words. Make sure you read a little bit more in the book. Don't forget to, practice your spelling words, whatever. Nothing. Zero. Zilch. Not a single teacher gave a flip about the academics of any of their children. And those were the good ones.
Yeah.
So that the jig is up. Schools do not care about you or your children or their education, but this book does. Parents' Guide to Homeschool.
Well,
So
and
that's it.
I think, Sam, the importance of that book is because I think a lot of parents wanting to do this just feel overwhelmed.
Yes,
They don't know where to start.
I understand.
And
That's why I wrote this.
and
That's
there's
literally why I wrote this, is to simplify it,
right.
break it down for you so that you can start to think about it differently, because so many people come at this with the school mentality. It's
Right.
school engendered. I can't do that because I never went to school for it.
Yeah, I don't have a master's degree. I don't
That's
have
right.
a PhD.
That's right. I can't tell you what a woman is because I'm not a biologist.
Yeah, exactly.
That is directly resulting from our schools that train us how incapable we are. That's what school teaches you.
Right.
It is debilitating.
Yeah.
So if you feel incapable, understand you're a product of the schools.
Yeah.
Do you want that same feeling of
For your
impotence
kids. For your
child?
kids. Yeah, for your children. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure, and time has just flown by. We've been talking to Sam Sorbo, who's the author of, and I highly recommend, the book Parents' Guide to Homeschool, Making Education Easy and Fun. She's been in the trenches. She's done that, and the book will help you, get started and maybe push through the fear and get moving with it. So,
By the way, I should mention sorbostudios.com. I'm on Twitter. I'm on Instagram. I'm on Facebook.
Right.
I'm on all those great things. And you can find everything at sorbostudios.com, including all the books. But yeah, once you cover everything that's in the book, and it's like a workbook. Well, I think you said that. You will be set free.
Yeah.
You will know how to go about getting the education of your child done. And more than that, you will have a relationship that you never dreamed of with this incredible creature that you've created.
Yeah, there you go.
You brought into the world.
There you go. Thanks again, Sam. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening. If you would like to listen to more Clarity from Chaos shows on demand, go to clarityfromchaos.buzzsprout.com or send Dave an email at info@clarityfromchaos.com for information on previous shows. You can also listen to the show on Apple Podcast, Spotify, Twitter, or Google Podcast. Until next time, please remember, it's not about waiting for the storm to pass. It's about learning to dance in the rain. Be well, everyone.